I'm Wesley Story.
Hey there, this is Sam Robles.
And I'm Wesley Story.
And we're coming to you live today to talk about the census. There's been so much happening around the census. We just heard some announcements from Trump last week. But what we really want to come together and talk to you about is why the census is so important. There's so much that this data collecting tool does for our democracy and the way that we're represented in government. And so we just really want to dive in, talk to y'all. If you have any questions today, write them down. Wesley, tell us what happened this year? How did we get to the Supreme Court around the census?
Yeah. So just to start off, I want to talk a little bit about what the census is, because we all know it's a really important thing and it's been in the news a lot, but I don't think a lot of people really understand exactly what it is and why it's important. And so the census is a constitutionally mandated demographic count that our country does every 10 years. And its main goal is really to count the total number of people living in our country. That's what it's there for, and that's what we need it to do. And so the census has been politicized the last couple of years, and Donald Trump and the Trump administration, their goal was to add a citizenship question to the census asking, are you an American citizen? And so that has been the subject of debate for the last year or so. And this question and this went all the way to the Supreme Court, and there was a ruling on it. And so I want to talk a little bit about what that ruling was. It was kind of a complicated decision, and I think that a lot of people don't really understand exactly what the Supreme Court said. But it's important to understand what they said so that we know moving forward that this fight is not really over. And so SCOTUS ruled that the decision is not that you're allowed to add a citizenship question to the census, but they also said that the question that Trump was adding and the reasoning, the rationale behind it wasn't there. They didn't have the right justification. And so the way this worked out is that SCOTUS kind of left the Trump administration an out in a way, because they said that the question was allowed. They just said that they needed a better reasoning behind it. And so what this did is the Trump administration got together, and we all saw, like, on July 4th, all the news was saying, like, oh, they stayed working during the holidays so that they could try to figure out a way to continue with the citizenship question and leave it on the Constitution. And they weren't able to, and so then Trump had his big announcement, which was the executive decision that he announced last week. And do you want to talk a little bit about what that announcement
absolutely
was?
And I think as we're talking about what's happened over the last couple of weeks, we need to talk about the context of it all, right? As we're talking about the census as a country, as the Supreme Court took it up, and Trump announced his executive order, we have ICE raids that have been executed all over the United States in major cities, right? We have seen on our southern border that children are being detained in horrible conditions, separated from their families. I mean, the context of all this is so real, and we can clearly see the political agenda that's behind it. And it's all to the detriment of us, of folks who live, work in Texas, who are voters and non-voters, but everyone who is here a part of the economy. And so what we heard last week was, after the Supreme Court said, Trump, you cannot have your question on the census, he kind of huff and puffed and went away and tried to get some lawyers to find a solution. And what we saw last Thursday was a defeated Trump. He was not able to put his citizenship question that he wanted for a political agenda onto the census, right? And this is, if we think about it, it's like a nationwide deploy into people's homes, and very similar to what we're seeing with the raids, right? Just like coming to someone's home and asking them that question is what's playing out. And so he is not allowed to do that, but he did order government agencies to collect that data. But Wesley, you and I talked about this last week, and with Trump, what we saw last week was really a way to save himself to appeal to his people. Yeah,
his announcement was really and truly a way to save face. He wants to make it seem like he's doing everything in his power to continue this mission, even though it's very obvious that it failed and it's not going to be allowed to be included in the census. And the question that many of us had was, oh, well, if your plan is just to get that data from your agencies anyway, then why didn't you do that instead of trying to add it to the census in the first place? And so what we really think this is a way to appeal to his base, just to let them know that he's still racist, he's going to continue to be racist, and that all the racists who support him can also continue to support him because he's going to keep doing those actions.
And if we could just recap for folks who have just joined us, this is Sam Robles and Wesley
And I'm
Story.
Wesley.
We have been talking about what's happened over the last couple of weeks around the census, and really wanting to talk to you all about why it's important to keep the census to its truest form to protect the integrity of our elections, our democracy. And so Wesley did a recap for us of how the census works and what its purpose is. But Wesley, when we use the data for the census, what are we using that for? We use it for districting,
yes.
For representation. What other ways are we using that data?
Right. So knowing the number of people in the country helps with a lot of different things. And as you mentioned, so it's used for redistricting numbers, so drawing district lines and determining how many people are in each district, in which that's part of the reason it was so important, because by not including everybody, it was kind of working in the Republicans' favors, because they were going to kind of use the redistricting in their favor in order to make sure that they got more votes and everything. And so that was part of the big why it was being politicized. It's also used to determine federal aid that goes to different areas, different states. And so by undercounting a population, you wouldn't be able to get as much money to contribute to everyday things like infrastructure and healthcare and things like that.
Yeah, and one of the things that I immediately think about as you're talking about this, Wesley, is the city of Houston. And while Harvey may have happened a couple summers ago, the real infrastructure rebuilding that is happening is so real. And it's such a huge city and with a large immigrant population. And to see one of our strongest Texas cities not be able to receive that funding, all because of a political agenda, I mean, it hurts me. We've seen how folks are still recovering from natural disasters and other things.
And one thing that I think is important to point out is that this would have had a detrimental effect on Texas and a lot of many other states. And Republicans were really cutting off their nose to spite their face, because this isn't something that wouldn't have impacted Texas but would have impacted other blue states. It's something that would impact red states as well and really hurt our citizens here in Texas. And so our Texas Republicans who were in favor of this question and wanted this question in the census, they were really not helping out our case at all, and it wouldn't have been something that benefited their state. And so they weren't fighting for the best interest of their people.
There's something that really stands out to me in all this that I think, we've worked here at Progress Texas closely on, is the way that we're seeing efforts to suppress either the right to vote or, in this case, the right to representation, to be represented in our government, is just almost like a back-to-back, like it's just coming in different forms, right? We've seen it here in Texas through nasty anti-voter legislation. We've seen it through the census and talked about it through the last couple of years. But really, this coordinated attack by Republicans, it's no longer in the shadows, right?
Yeah,
we can see it in plain sight for what it is.
And I think you make a really good point, because that's something that it's been going on for a really long time. It's nothing new, but if you're thinking that it's been ramped up these last couple of years, you'd be right. And that's because Republicans, like we've talked about, are starting to realize that they're losing power, they're losing support. Texas is becoming a battleground state, or states across the country are becoming battleground states, and they're trying as hard as they can to hold on to that power. And so they're making it more and more difficult for people to get out and vote, people to be represented in their government, and these are different ways that they're doing that.
And here at Progress Texas, we absolutely believe that every single Texan deserves to be counted, should be counted, to ensure not only those dollars that our state needs to function, but to really serve, to really bring in those numbers, to be a part of this representation in our government in so many different ways, because we need to be represented accurately, fairly.
That's right.
Wesley, let's go into a little bit. I'm curious. I know we have a little bit of the history of the census, but before we jump into that, just so folks who are watching right now, we right now will not have a citizenship question in April of 2020.
Yeah, as of right now, there is no citizenship question in the census, and we are almost certain that there's not going to be. Where the fight is over. We know that it's gone back and forth for a while now, but as of right now, there's not going to be a citizenship question in the census in 2020. And so what that means is that we need everyone to fill it out. Because all of those things that we were saying it would have done, now we're kind of a little bit worried, because we're worried that people are going to be under the impression that the census is bad and that there's going to be a question and that it's going to continue to scare people. And so we won, and we don't want Republicans to have their way and for them to make it to where people don't fill out the census. We want people to fill it out.
And the way we absolutely ensure a win for each of us, right, regardless of political spectrum or your immigration status, is to make sure that we're we're able to fill out the census, that we know what information we need to fill out, why it's important, and why it's going to help us build a democracy that really represents each of us. Wesley, let's jump in a little bit into the census. So I know this has been around for decades,
yes.
right? This has been something that has been a part of the way we structure our government for a while.
The census originally started in 1790, so it's been around for a really long time.
A long time. And I know that I think this question has only been asked once before.
And really it hasn't, the citizenship question has actually technically never been asked to this extent. So what the plan was to ask it of every single person. And we've never actually had a citizenship question that was asked of every household, of every person. It was asked in different ways over the years, but kind of a lot less aggressive as the way that they were wanting to do it now. And what we know is that was just as an attempt to imitate or intimidate the people filling out the census. They didn't want them to fill it out, and so that's why it was going to be asked to such an extent. And so when people say that it's been asked in the past, so it can be asked now, that's technically not true. It wasn't done in this way in the past.
That's right, and I think one of the things, not only are we seeing intimidation in so many forms against immigrant families, but this sort of intimidation, I think our senior advisor, Glenn Smith, has talked about how this also intimidates everyday people in filling out the census. So the way the counts will just be completely inaccurate in the process.
No, there were a lot of census experts that came out and said that this was going to result in a complete undercount of the populations, especially here in Texas. They said we stood to lose billions of dollars in federal funding. We could have even lost seats in Congress because our population is growing and we stand to gain maybe two or one seat in Congress, and we could have lost those seats as well. So it really would have been detrimental in Texas.
Yeah, and we're growing so fast here. We're growing so fast here, and what I keep thinking about as we talk about the census and as Texas is growing is that our electorate is becoming younger. There are more people of color. They live in our biggest cities. And Texas is really starting to change in so many ways that we've seen in the last year here in Texas. And so just to see the way that our representation could be impacted is concerning. And it's something that we need to educate ourselves on and go out and make sure that people have this information, that we're filling it out.
That's right, yeah. It's going to be really important that people get out and fill the census out once it finally does come in April. I
know that this session we worked a little bit, this legislative session at the Capitol, we worked a little bit on looking at the census and checking some stuff out. I remember that several legislators, I think Cesar Blanco from El Paso, wrote a piece of legislation that would help us make sure that Texas had an outreach committee.
Yeah.
So even though if there's like political influences at play, that we have resources available to talk to people about what they're actually filling out.
That's right, yeah.
What else can folks do right now to take action on the census?
So we should have posted a petition underneath this video just asking people to sign on and say that they believe in a complete and accurate census count. And so we would love for you to fill out that petition. Obviously, it's really important that when the census does come out that you complete it. We've said that a couple of times now, but that's going to be in April in 2020. So look forward to that. That's a little ways away, but it's really important that you fill out that information. But as of now, it's just important that people are informed about the census and how important it is. So if you know people that maybe don't know about the census, this history, or are worried and don't understand what exactly happened with this citizenship question, if you can inform those people that it's not going to be in the census anymore and it's important that it gets filled out.
So Wesley, one of the things that I think about with the census is, you know, I had a camp advisor who actually was a part of canvassing for the census. Now this year I think is a little bit different, right? It's no longer just going to be people coming to your door or being mailed, but I think there's different ways that you can fill out the census. Yeah,
so I believe it is going to be mailed to people still, but there also are still going to be census canvassers going around making sure that people fill it out. There are a lot of different ways, and I know there are resources online that we can also link to just to help people understand what to look for and how to fill it out.
For folks just tuning in, we've been on live for just a couple minutes, but we want to make sure that you know what we're doing today. We're talking about the census, what's happened since Trump made his announcement last Thursday. It was a moment of defeat for Donald Trump in his crusade to get the citizenship question on the census. And we've talked a lot about the context of this all and how it's impacting immigrant families and how it's another tool of intimidation, right?
That's right.
Not only are we seeing ICE raids and the detention centers and the horrible conditions along the border, but now we're seeing sort of another attempt to come at people even closer to their home.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think a lot about Wesley, especially coming from an immigrant mixed status family, is that this doesn't just impact my family, right? It's not just a way that the citizenship question could impact an immigrant family in your community, but the what do we call these? The rippling effects of how these undercounts will impact us all is real, and there's just so many ways that this can happen.
Yeah, as we mentioned before, I mean that the census controls so much information. Not only does it control the federal funding that we get and the congressional seats that we're allotted, but it also controls, I mean, I know as a journalist, I use the census data for like writing stories, and the information that we're given, it's everywhere. And so what not having an accurate count does is it makes it to where it's difficult to really understand where we're at as a country, where our population is at, and what steps we need to take moving forward to ensure that all people are taken care of, all people are represented, and all people get what they need to thrive and survive.
Absolutely. Satvik, one of our newest team members here at Progress Texas, brought up the point that so much of this data is used to create policy changes.
That's right.
Whether it's for specific groups or to take a look at how a policy might impact our state. I mean, we're using this data every day in so many different ways, whether you're a reporter or you're a state legislator. Like, we need to make sure that these numbers are accurate so that we can build the best Texas that we deserve. And
we know the census, it's not really a sexy topic or something that people take a lot of time to talk about, but the numbers are important because the numbers represent real people, and it's those real people that end up being impacted. And so that's why we wanted to take the time to talk about it today, because we want to make sure that people understand just how important it is.
That's what we should name this video. But Wesley, I couldn't help but notice that we're both rocking some Supreme Court mugs.
We have our mugs. We're kind of going back to the SCOTUS decision, and we were proud of the 4 liberal justices who were part of kind of the ruling that said, or actually 4 liberal justices and then John Roberts said that the justification given for the question wasn't quite there. But then on the other hand, so there were a lot of different pieces of this ruling, but then on the other hand, John Roberts joined with the other 4 conservative justices, and they were the ones that ruled that the citizenship question could still be allowed in the census potentially. So we're not sure how we feel about Roberts right now, but we know that we love Ruth Bader Ginsburg and we love our Supremes.
We love our ladies.
Yeah.
They're doing great. Before we close, Wesley, I think folks who are watching today want to know, what do we need to do? What do we need to do to ensure that we are able to get the best count of our community, to bring in those dollars, to get that representation at all levels of government? What do we need to do today, right now?
I think it starts with just informing yourselves and then informing the people that are close to you. So that was part of the reason that we did this video today, is to inform people that this question is no longer in the census and the census needs to be filled out. And so letting other people know that same thing, letting them know that, hey, the citizenship question, it's not going to be there. We won that fight. Now we need all people to be represented.
If you want to stay up to date with what's happening with the census, if you want to find ways to plug in and take action, we have a petition in the comment section of this video somewhere where you can go ahead and sign up and stay informed. And we need to stay informed and be able to come out strong on this, because this has to do with our representation, every single one of us. It's not just impacting immigrant families, it's going to impact all of us, and the rippling effects are real. We're going to see this play out in our infrastructure and the ways that we make policy every day and who represents us.
Yeah.
So we need your voice and we need you to take action.
And here at Progress, we're going to continue to advocate for all people to be counted fairly in the 2020 census. So if you follow along with us, we're going to be giving you updates on the census and what's happening. We know this fight is not over. We know it's going to continue, whether that be through the census or through Trump's executive order and his efforts to find citizenship data. So follow along with us and we'll keep you informed on this.
Thank you all so much for watching. I'm Sam Robles.
And I'm Wesley Story.
Thanks.